Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, actually, wherever you are actively listening to this 12-step Zoom video recording telephone workshop. It's called Is Being Recorded. And maybe you're listening, watching it at some other time, which is, of course, the point of recording. My name is Herb, and I'm an alcoholic. Today is November 20th here in Los Angeles. I would ask you to really intentionally recommit to that open mind and that open heart that is expressed in the set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and you, for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and especially you. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Just to give us a sense of where we've been, so that we can be where we are and kind of anticipate how it fits into where we're going. We've engaged in a process, a very precise, sometimes difficult process of waking up from being asleep, not knowing actually that we're asleep, but suffering. Whether you're suffering from your addiction because you're relatively new, or because you have, for whatever reason, some circumstances in which you find yourself relapsing. Whatever your addiction is, you're suffering. That's the first half of the first step. And we spent a long time doing a deep dive into at least getting an understanding of what does that mean. I have a problem with my body. It's a biochemical problem. It's not my fault. It's my genetics. I have an allergic reaction to some type of substance or some type of process. It's a metaphor. It's not necessarily science, but it really explains and helps me to resolve the why question. Why, when I start, can I not stop? Oh, biochemistry, physiology, biology. Well, I'm pretty intelligent, fairly well educated, and I have a strong will in many situations. Why can't I stay stopped when I stop? Because I don't like the suffering that comes when I start. Not because I have a problem with the mind. I have an obsession. It's not my fault. It's the way I'm built psychologically. But I also come to realize that although it's not my fault, it is my responsibility to deal with it. Because I'm a human being that knows that they know eventually, or has the capacity for that, and I have free will to be able to make decisions, to take actions to deal with the suffering. Nobody else is responsible. for my addiction, except me. Dash that my life had become unmanageable. Now you may be sitting here with months or years even, or decades even, of abstinence in recovery. Continuous abstinence in recovery. And yet you're sitting here. Perhaps because you're suffering. Serial, sober suffering. Not from your addiction, but from the unmanageability of your life as you experience it in circumstances and with other people. Suffering is a great motivator to try to find a solution to modify the suffering. One of the reasons for our addiction is we wanted to reduce the tension in our life. Then we found out that short term it did work, long term it just increased the tension. And we looked at the bedevilments as the behavioral manifestation of the spiritual malady or the human malady. I don't need to use the word spiritual. The descriptions on page 52, made current and personal, suggest behavior that describes my suffering. How does it look? And then on page 62, it describes underneath, why does it happen? Oh, because I'm self-willed, self-centered. It's not my fault. It's the way I'm wired, existentially, ontologically. Big words that just mean it's my very nature. I will always choose me on my own power. That's the way Bill concludes page 62, the second paragraph. We can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. I wish more people would really have that experience. That's unmanageability. That's what Bill means in step 10, that we're not cured. We're always going to be human. In step 10, he says, watch for resentment and fear and dishonesty and selfishness when they crop up, not if they crop up. We will always on a daily basis be human. And as humans, we can make progress in consciousness and in our practice and action, but we will never be perfect. Please hear that. There's 30% of you out there that are perfectionists, whether you know it or not. It's not healthy. To want to be better is healthy. To want to be perfect is a delusion. It's a neurotic aspiration built on fantasy. And so we collapse in full surrender at the defeat that we've experienced either from our addiction or from our life. And we take several months to complete step 1. Understanding it is good. Experiencing it is really the point. And then out of that complete implosion, we're asked to make a decision with that free will that we have determined is not so free. Bill asks us on page 53, which is the bullseye point of step 2. God is or God isn't. What is your choice? Wow. That's in your face. That's a confrontation. And in fact, the next sentence says, now we're confronted with the question of faith. Faith, a decision of my free will. Oh, I finally get it. I don't have free will with regard to my addiction. I really don't have free will with regard to my unmanageability. But I do have free will in my choice of God or no God. Power or no power. Hope or no hope. It's a faith decision. There's no evidence, there's no certitude, there's no knowledge, there's no feeling, there's no emotion, there's no substance. It's dark and thin. And we make this decision because we don't see any alternative. And we choose our concept. And we move on, realizing that reality that we have made a choice about the concept, that reality behind the concept, a mystery that we cannot comprehend, is deep down inside of ourselves. No, it's another decision. We don't feel it. We don't know it. We just make that decision. And so we realize within me, there is not effective human power. Within me, there is effective power. It's just not me. But it's available to me, and it cares about me, and I can have a relationship with it, capital I. Again, no feeling, no knowledge, no certitude, no emotion, no substance, thin and dark. That's the journey of faith. And yet, although it's dark, there's the light, faint flicker of light, of hope at the end, down the road, in the tunnel, down at the end of this tunnel. And maybe it's that you've seen, witnessed to the light by other people, that it's there. Or you've read something and been inspired that the light is there. Because you hear it, you see it in other people or in other circumstances. And you proceed on that. That existential leap of faith into the abyss. Taking actions. And we began those actions with step 4. What are the obstacles in me, the clouds in me to the light? Bill uses the term sunlight of the spirit deep down inside, underneath all reality. The clouds in me that are from me, block the sunlight that is available to me deep down in me. And the process of steps 4 through 9 is the identification of the clouds and their dissipation and removal. Partly with my action, mostly with grace. That's just a term I use to describe a mystery of the X plus factor that I can't explain. Because what I know is I do an awful lot of work from 4 to 9. I do an awful lot of work. It takes weeks, months, maybe even years for some of us to complete steps 4 through 9. We do a lot of work. And then we realize that the results are disproportionately larger than the work I contributed to it. That's what I call grace. That's what I call God. That's what I call gift. That's what I call a power other than myself. That's what I call the mystery. Because I can't explain it, then I don't need to. I can observe it. Now, standing on the path, months or years later, after I have finished step 9 and lived that way in steps 10, 11, and 12, a practice that is a daily practice, I look back over my shoulder and I go, I still don't know whether it's true. All the theory, all the words, all the explanations that I have heard and I have read and I have seen and I have actually said myself, I have no idea whether all of that is true as I have expressed it. What I do know is true is that I have been changed. I have been transformed. I have been given a life that flourishes, and it started 31 years ago. Yeah. Now, I'm sober 35 years. And that was a gift and a story for another day. Alcohol was removed from me without my request and without my action. My only response to that is humility and gratitude. I went to AA 2 or 3 months after I had quit drinking, after drinking had quit me. And at 4 years of sobriety, going to a meeting every day, talking to a sponsor every day, I met a man, a magnetic north pole for me, that changed my life. a mechanic with the big book. He took me through the steps for the very first time out of the book, precisely like you're doing. And we came to step 4. And we did the resentment inventory like you've been doing. Columns 1 and 2, and you've begun to do column 3. And I believe I gave you the assignment of taking a look at pages 65, 66, and 67. It's in between column 3 and column 4. '65. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. Well, you're not finished. I know that. But why wait? When you have a tool in front of you that could, in fact, expedite the process that you're involved in, why not become acquainted with it right now? I didn't know this 31 years ago. But after I've done the work and I look back on it, I get very practical. When I encounter these tools that it took me weeks or months to become exposed to and incorporate into my program, I saw how effective they were. Why would we wait? I mean, that's one of the reasons that we start the workshop with 12, 11, and then 10, so that you can become aware of the purpose and the tools for a spiritual awakening. Why wait? Oh, you're not going to do them at the beginning of the workshop as competently as you're going to do them at the end of the workshop. Okay. But you can do them. And then practicing them, get better at them as you make progress in the reason for them. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong were as far as most of us ever got. We blame others. We're victims. I was a victim, 48 years old, 4 years sober. I was a victim. I didn't know that I didn't know. I thought that I did. One of the speakers in a meeting said, it's not the things that we don't know that hurt us, although that is true, they do. But what really hurts us more is the things that we know with certitude that are just absolutely wrong. And that was absolutely my experience, both with regard to who I am and who I am not, and what this whole thing is about God. And it took me another few years and a couple journeys through the steps for the full curtain to part in terms of knowing who I am, knowing who I'm not, and then realizing that my concept of God up till that point was the very impediment to my relationship with the mystery. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Sometimes it was remorse and then we were sore at ourselves. It's okay to put yourself on your resentment list. The big book is very supportive of that. I'm not encouraging it. I'm just saying that if in fact that's your inclination and experience, why not? The more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. Now he's going to get into a prayer practice. The whole point of this now, next 10 minutes of discussion, this review of pages 66 and 67, is to introduce you to a prayer practice, a prayer for the removal of deep resentments. We each have a cancer, many cancers maybe, that will metastasize if in fact not dealt with. They will metastasize if not dealt with. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. So he's making a distinction between regular resentments and deep resentments. I'm asking you to take a look at your list, whatever your list is, of resentments, and to identify with a check mark the deep ones, those that have roots down into the marrow of your bones. I had 8. My father, who was dead 12 years at that point, but I had a visceral rage every time I thought of him. My mother, my wife, my sister, 4 bosses, and a coach. I had 8. Well, I think that's 8. The point is, I had a whole big list of resentments at that time. I've tried to help you shape yours so that it's no more than 20. But even if it's less than 20, just identify the deep ones. They're not all 5,000-pound sharks. Some of them are 1-pound trout, 5-pound tuna. I'm not a fisherman, so I'm not sure of the accuracy of my count. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? The alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. In fact, he says it will put you in the grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. See, the metaphors I use, I get from the big book, clouds and sunlight. Resentment is a cloud. It's a cancer. Small, and then it metastasizes and grows, if not treated, excised by surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. Use your metaphors. It needs to be eliminated, otherwise it will grow and it will squeeze the human life, the spiritual life, the emotional life, and eventually the very physical life out of you. The insanity of alcohol, the insanity of our addiction, the obsession, that's insanity. It'll be different this time. A thought that is a lie returns and we engage in our addiction again. We drink again, it says here. And with us to drink is to die. If we are to live and be free of anger, the grouch and the brainstorm are not for us. They are the dubious luxury of normal people. Dubious, it's doubtful. Luxury, not necessary, normal. Nobody on this call. Well, you already know that. We are abnormal. We are innately defective. Our bodies are different. Our minds are different. Those are the things that make us innately different. It's not a moral thing. It's a biological and a psychological thing. And even as human beings, not even connected to our addiction, as human beings we're defective. Our will is defective in that it will always choose me as a survival mechanism. And the whole point of my free will is to grow through some type of rite of passage to full maturity where I'm using my will properly. Certainly to survive, certainly to thrive, but mostly to have a relationship with meaning broader than myself and a contribution to the community of humanity around myself. That's science now, psychology, happiness, not just theology and 12-step spirituality. We turn back to the list, for it holds the key to the future. We are prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle, a 180-degree view. We're going to turn around from left to right. We're going to turn around from inside to outside. To begin to see the world and as people really dominated us in that state, wrongdoings of others fancied or real had the power to actually kill. We're looking at that, column 1, column 2, column 3. How did it impact me? It diminished our lives as we perceived and interpreted it. How could we escape? Resentments must be mastered, but how? Here's the wooden stake in the heart again. We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. We're as powerless over the removal of our resentments as we are powerless over our addiction. That is a heavy hit. So he's saying now we're going to need prayer. This is our course. We need to change our attitude. We realize that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Well, that's a new attitude. They're not just jerks and other four-letter words. Oh, they're spiritually sick. It introduces a little compassion for their humanity. Though we did not like their symptoms, on page 67. And the way these disturbed us, column 1, column 2, they, like ourselves, are sick too. Oh, this new attitude of compassion for them includes me acknowledging that I'm just a human being just like them. Not so much compassion as it is awakening to the reality I am actually no different than they are. A pathetic human being. Pathetic in the sense of a warm, affectionate recognition of my brokenness. Not in judgment. Now here it is. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry, thy will be done. See, Bill is suggesting a prayer here. When we're powerless, he always suggests prayer. We will see that in every piece and component of the fourth step. We're powerless over our resentment. We're powerless over our fear. We're powerless over our dishonesty. We're powerless over our sexual behavior. We have the responsibility of identifying it because we can know. We have the responsibility of taking some action because we can decide to take free action. And some of that may help. But in the final analysis, we're powerless to remove resentment and fear and dishonesty and to change our sexual behavior and to not hold secrets. We're powerless over that. So in the final analysis, we ask for power. We ask God to help us. Notice, we're not praying for them. This is a poorly understood area in the big book because you hear it all the time in the meetings. Oh, pray for them. No, I mean, first of all, that's a wonderful spiritual practice. I'm not dismissing it. I'm just clarifying that that's not the recommendation here. That's not the instruction here. The instruction here is we pray for ourselves. We invite the divine surgeon to enter into our cancerous soul, to remove surgically the cancer in us and to bring healing to us. We're asking for divine intervention. We ask God to help us show them tolerance, pity, and patience. He goes on in the next paragraph. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. There it is again. That mantra in the big book of the ultimate antidote for self-centeredness is other-centeredness as expressed in being helpful. That's how page 89 starts, working with others. Nothing will so much ensure immunity. Immunity. We have a disease, we have a need for immunization, and this is the inoculation. Prayer and compassionate action. Steps 11, step 12. You'll hear that as a recurring theme because that's the underbelly, underneath this spiritual practice of turning and of being turned. Turning my commitment to action and the action. Being turned, my acceptance that there's grace, there's an X plus factor, there's a mystery at work here that I hope and expect and am grateful for when I experience. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. And I add that to the prayer. If you go to the Way of Life document, in between column 3 and column 4, you will find a current version of a prayer for the removal of deep resentment. What I'm suggesting here, because it was the suggestion made to me in the practice that I incorporated that gave me freedom from my deep resentment, is to, number one, check off the deep resentments. You might have 1, you might have 10. It doesn't make any difference what the number is. It's your judgment. It's a relative term. You're the one that makes that decision whether it's deep or not. And then begin to pray this prayer specifically. One prayer for the removal of each of those. Now, I had 8 deep resentments. At that time, I chose to pray 8 separate prayers, one for each of them, every day. And I prayed for 3 months on a daily basis with nothing happening. But after about 3 months, as I recall now, it's 31 years ago, one of them had no negative valence, no energy, no resentment. I crossed it off. And I prayed 7. And then as they disappeared like snow in springtime, it went down to 1 and then none. And the real magic, number 1, is that they were removed. But the even bigger experience was the next time I did the step works, none of those resentments were in my life. They had been permanently removed. See, the focus of the work is a relationship with power to give us freedom. Freedom from our addiction, certainly. That's the original stimulus, first half of the first step. But freedom from unmanageability on a daily basis, living free of these irritations, circumstances and people, life and reality as it is. That's serenity. That's the freedom that we want and we'll work hard for. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Brilliant call today. Thank you, everybody.